Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm Chairwoman Clarissa Rodriguez, and I now call to order the 970th meeting of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. Madam Secretary, will you please call attendance?
Vice Chair Foster.
Here.
Board Member Pepperaki. Here. Board Member Higgins.
Here.
Board Member Roven.
Here.
Board Member Williams.
Here.
Board Member Hull.
Here.
Board Member Ostley.
Here.
Board Member Crane.
Here.
Board Member Stasko.
Here.
Board Member Lavelle.
Here.
Chair, all members are present.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 1, approval of the September 2018 meeting minutes. You have all received a copy of the September 18th, 2018 meeting minutes to review. Are there any questions or need for discussion?
Move to accept.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 2, Office of General Counsel's Departmental Report. General Counsel David Wertheim will present the statistical and informational report for September.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, board members, and guests. Here is a statistical report for the workflow for the month of September for all of the divisions which resolve issues here at the board. First, in adjudication, there were 15,747 hearings held, 9,661 cases fully resolved at the hearing, 445 reserved decisions issued. There were also 1,508 waiver agreements approved. Those at the hearing which were approved, 1,343, and through the desk process, 387. In the Administrative Review Division, 992 applications were received in September, 1,054 were processed, leaving an inventory at end of month of 4,137, with 92% of review applications processed in less than 6 months. In terms of full board review, 165 applications were received, 142 processed, leaving a case inventory of full board review of 313. That concludes my report. Of course, I will take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or need for discussion? May I have a motion to accept the report? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, license applications. Elizabeth Lott of the Office of General Counsel will now present any licensing applications.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair,
Good morning.
board members, and guests. You have before you the recommendations from the assigned board panels regarding license applications listed in Part 3 of today's agenda. The board panel recommendations are as follows. Section 24A, Thomas Prisco, 3-year renewal. Section 53B, Maxon Administrators, 3-year renewal. Emerald Claims Management of New York, LLC, 1-year renewal. Gary Nichols, individual license, 3-year renewal. Paystaff Technologies, Inc., 3-year abeyance. And finally, 53D, Creative Risk Solutions, LLC, is being held over to the November board meeting. I present the recommendations of the assigned board panels to the full board for your decision.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or need for discussion? May I have a motion to accept the recommendation? Okay, second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, legal appeals. General Counsel David Wertheim will now present the recommendations concerning decisions by the Appellate Division.
Thank you again, Chair. From the time of the September board meeting, there were 9 decisions issued by the Appellate Division, 3rd Department, with respect to workers' compensation claims. All 9 of those decisions affirmed the board decision. It is the recommendation of General Counsel that all of the decisions of the court be adopted as decisions of the board.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the recommendations? Okay. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 5, mandatory full board review. 5A, Village of Portchester, case number G0771530. Is there a motion with respect to 5A on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the opinion as modified be accepted as the opinion of the board.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any recusals in this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing there is no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. 5B, Moss Management LLC, case number G1136916. Is there a motion with respect to 5B on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the opinion of the dissent as modified be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any recusals in this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing and hearing no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes, that motion is passed. 5C, Singer Transport, case numbers 8942-2532 and 8931-2438. Is there a motion with respect to 5C on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the full board review be denied and that the majority opinion be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Okay. Are there any recusals in this matter?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, duly noted. Board Member Logan.
I'll
Is-
second that motion.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay. Seeing and hearing no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes, that motion is passed. Thank you. 5D, Morgan Materials Incorporated. Case number G0857073. Is there a motion with respect to 5D on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move that the majority opinion be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any recusals in this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing and hearing no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes, that motion is passed. 5E, Expo Advantage USA Incorporated. Case number G1405229. Is there a motion with respect to 5E on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that the majority opinion be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Are there any recusals in this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion?
Yes.
Okay. In light of the opposition, I call upon the secretary for a roll call vote.
Okay, Board Member Lavelle.
No.
Board Member Stasko.
Yes.
Board Member Ostley.
Yes.
Board Member Hall. Yes. Board Member Crane.
Yes.
Board Member Petracki.
Yes.
Board Member Logan.
Yes.
Board Member Higgins.
Yes.
Board Member Williams.
No.
Vice Chair Foster.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
That motion is carried 9-2.
Okay, thank you. 5F, O.W. Hubble and Sons Incorporated. Case number G1709760. Is there a motion with respect to 5F on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move that the full board review be denied and the opinion of the majority be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any recusals in this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion?
Yes.
Okay, in light of the opposition, I call upon the secretary for a roll call vote.
Board Member Higgins.
Yes.
Board Member Logan.
Yes.
Board Member Ostley.
Yes.
Board Member Stasko.
Yes.
Board Member Crane.
Yes.
Board Member Williams.
Yes.
Board Member Petracki.
Yes.
Board Member Lavelle.
Nope.
Board Member Hall. Yes. Vice Chair Foster.
Yes.
Chairwoman.
Yes.
That motion is carried 10-1.
Thank you. 5G, John J. Griffin. Case number G1391113. Is there a motion in respect to 5G on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the majority opinion be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any recusals from this case? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing and hearing no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes, that motion is passed. Agenda item number 6, discretionary full board review. I now turn this portion of the agenda over to Vice Chair Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the case listed in item 6 on your agenda, it's been recommended that full board review be granted. That case is a matter of New York State Department of Correctional Green Correctional Facility, case number G1699473. I move to refer the case back to the respective panel for further consideration.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any recusals from this matter? Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, now, seeing and hearing no opposition, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes, that motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item number 7, other business. The 2019 meeting schedule for the full board. You've all received a copy of the 2019 schedule for review. Is there a motion to accept the 2019 meeting schedule?
Motion to accept.
Thank you. Second? Okay. Any opposition to the motion? Any recusals? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Is there any other business? Okay. Hearing no other business, we're moving on to agenda item number 8, our guest speakers. Today, we are pleased to welcome 2 special guests from the New York State Compensation Insurance Board, Jeremy Addy, President, and Ziv Kimmel, Senior Vice President and Chief Actuary. They visited with us before and are here to provide a brief refresher on the rating board, after which they'll share their 2018 State of the System report. Before I turn it over to them, a bit of background on our guests. Jeremy Addy joined NYSERB as President-elect in February of 2016 and assumed the position of President that July. Prior to joining the rating board, Jeremy served in the office of the New York State Governor from 2012 to 2016. Most recently as Assistant Counsel to the Governor for Labor and Financial Services. Prior to the Governor's office, Jeremy was a litigator at a New York City law firm. He is a graduate of Cornell and Brooklyn Law School. Ziv Kimmel joined the rating board in 2008 as Director of Actuarial Research and was named Senior Vice President and Chief Actuary in 2016. Ziv started his career in 1997 as an actuarial analyst at ISO, where he worked on commercial property pricings. He joined the National Council of Compensation Insurance in 2001, where he worked on legislative analysis, medical cost research, and state rate filings. He is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society and a member of the American Academics of Actuaries. He earned his BA in mathematics from Queens College in 1997. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having us and making a little bit of time for us. For those of you who are, first, my name is Jeremy Addy, as the chair mentioned. And for those of you who are not familiar with the rating board, we are a private, nonprofit association licensed by the New York State Department of Financial Services to serve as the rate service organization for workers' compensation insurance in the state of New York. Now, what this means is that all insurance carriers who write workers' compensation policies in New York State are our members. They provide us with their data, their premiums, their losses, claim information. We take that information and we develop loss cost recommendations annually for the Superintendent of Financial Services. We also maintain all of the workers' compensation related manuals, which are really the rule books for writing workers' compensation insurance policies in New York. Now, in 2016, we began to transform our organization, which is 105 years old, to meet the changing needs of the marketplace. Now, implementing our new vision is at the core of our work. And that vision is to serve as the objective and trusted thought leader in the New York State workers' compensation insurance marketplace. And this vision moves well beyond the numbers crunch of lost cost filings and into finding the stories in the data. and relaying those stories in a way that's accessible to everyone, because we believe that you shouldn't have to be an insurance industry expert or an actuary to understand the marketplace or the industry. So to realize our vision, we are remaking ourselves, we're changing how we work, how we interact with our stakeholders, and how we view our role in the marketplace and our expectations of ourselves. Importantly, our new vision brings two objectives into view that are important to discuss today. First, fostering our partnership with our public sector stakeholders. We're focused on developing a productive partnership with our regulators, obviously with the Workers' Compensation Board and with the New York State Department of Financial Services. And what does this mean? It means when we interact with our regulators, it won't be with our hand out asking for something. Rather, we want to lend our expertise and make sure that our regulators understand the most recent market data and research and are in the best position possible to regulate the marketplace and the community. And I think we're well on our way to providing value. For example, in much of the past 18 months, our actuarial team has been working hand in glove with the Workers' Compensation Board on their impairment guidelines and the revised medical fee schedule. And I think the information we've been able to provide has added an additional dimension to their analysis. And our work together has also strengthened our relationship. And we'll continue to do everything that we can to serve as a resource to the Workers' Compensation Board and the Department of Financial Services, because we believe that we all benefit when our policymakers have the best information available. Now, second, our research and reports. We've begun to leverage our repository of data to produce thought-provoking research and reports regularly and often for the industry and obviously for our regulators. This morning, you will see the latest of our efforts in this regard. Zeev Kimmel, our chief actuary, who's here with me today, will present the 2018 State of the System report, which provides the vital statistics of the marketplace and is released annually. For those of you interested, you can find the full State of the System report, as well as a motor vehicle accident study, a regional study of the state, a drug study, and a medical payment study, all on our website. And as you might have guessed, we've got more research studies planned for 2019 and beyond. Finally, in addition to producing research and reports, we've also begun to engage the workers' compensation insurance community. We've held two New York State workers' compensation forums, one in September of 2017 and one in September of 2018 in New York City, in which we've invited all representatives of all stakeholders in the industry: labor, business, doctors, attorneys, every stakeholder. And it's the venue in which we present our research and reports. So in addition to just being that venue, we think it's an extraordinarily important opportunity for our stakeholders to get together, to speak to each other, importantly, to listen to each other, and hopefully develop working relationships and a dialogue. Because we believe that when we begin to understand each other, we can all move forward together. So, in conclusion, we want your feedback. Maintaining a productive partnership with our regulators is central to our vision, and we want to know how we can be helpful and how we can move that conversation forward. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Zeev Kimmel, the Rating Board's Chief Actuary, for the presentation of the 2018 State of the System report. And for those listening or watching by webcast, you can download our 2018 State of the System report and view our latest research papers on our website, www.nycirb.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to share with you this latest State of the System report. I'm going to discuss various aspects of the workers' comp system, from exposure to premiums to frequency and severity of losses and loss distributions. And I'm going to start with some key figures in the state. The most notable key figure in 2018, is an approval of an 11.7 decrease in the loss costs in the system. This includes both our annual review of experience from insurance carriers, as well as the impact of regulatory reforms in 2018. We have 265 carriers writing policies back in 2017, and total premium volume of $5.9 billion. About 540,000 policies, and in 557 occupational classifications. The figure in the bottom right is the 91.2% combined ratio. I'm going to explain a little bit on the details of what that means, but effectively it means that the insurance carriers have made an underwriting gain in 2017. I'm going to start with exposure, and exposure in workers' comp is measured by payroll. The blue line you see is payroll as reported by the New York State Department of Labor, and we have data through 2017. The yellow line represents data from insurance carrier that is reported to the rating board, and that because there's a reporting lag, we have only information up to 2015. You see that the lines move generally in the same directions, moving upward, but you do notice a gap between the lines, and that's because the rating board does not collect information from self-insurers, so the gap effectively represents the self-insurance market. You could see it's about a third of the marketplace. Moving to premiums. Premiums continue to growth. It was relatively flat in 2008 through 2010, and that was primarily due to the financial crisis. We had a little bit of a loss cost decrease, but since then we've had significant increases up to the current level of $5.9 billion. I want to talk a little bit about market shares, and specifically, excuse me, the state insurance funds market share. The state insurance funds market share is often viewed as how competitive the marketplace is. And in 2017, the market share was 38.3%. Now, there are several different ways to measure market shares. What you see up in the screen right now is based on direct written premiums, and these are the premiums that are reported to the Department of Financial Services on carriers' annual statements. We keep that definition, but I'm going to split the private carriers' share to two categories: large deductible, which you could see here is 8%, and standard policies, which are not deductible policies, at 53.7%. And obviously, the state fund, we have not changed the definition, so the state fund's market share stays at 38.3%. Now, those large deductible policies, they get significant credits because they write on a high deductible. So, for example, you have a policy that's $1 million without the deductible. With a deductible credit, it could be $700,000 policy. So there's a significant discount. Now, if those policies were written without those discounts, they would generate a lot more premium. So based on that measure, if they were not written on a deductible basis, we have those large deductible policies represent 35%, up from 8%. And based on this measure, the state funds market share is down to 27.4%. Now, all this information here is based on the insurance market. We did not take self-insurance, we did not bring self-insurance into the picture. If we bring it into the picture, they represent about a third of the marketplace, and by this measure, the state funds market share is 18.3%. This view shows how the state funds market share changed over time. We're going back to the direct written premium definition, and you could see that it peaked in 2013 at 45%, but since then there have been significant decreases in the state funds market share down to the level of 38.3%. This information, it gives us the top 10 carrier groups writing in New York State. Obviously, State Fund is up there at 38.3%, followed by AmTrust, Travelers, The Hartford, and Chubb, each of which is writing more than 5% of the market. Let's talk about occupational classifications. The rating board obtains information from the insurance carriers by class code. These are the top 10 classes by payroll measure. And you could see that the clerical office employees generate the most payroll in the state, and this is the highest or the largest classification in terms of payroll, followed by hospitals, physicians, and clerical service contractors. However, that particular class code, clerical office workers, they don't generate a lot of premium because of they have low rates compared to, for example, construction workers. So when we look at the top 10 classes in terms of premium, which is this slide, you see clerical office employees still in light blue, and it is ranked 9th. And the top class in terms of premium volume is the hospital class, followed by building operations. This view shows you the distribution of policies by size of risk. And I mentioned we have about 540,000 policies in the state, but most of these policies, more than 400,000 policies, are less than $5,000. That's represented by the large circle on the top left. However, these policies don't generate a lot of premium. They only represent they only generate $468 million in premium. In fact, policies with premiums of $5,000 or less are 77% of policies, but only 6% of premium. Large policies are a very small percentage of policies, but a very large percentage of premium. Policies over 50,000 are 4% of policies, but 50% of premium, 73% of premium. Sorry about that. I want to talk a little bit about changes in the system. Here we list the components of the 2017 reform last year that were incorporated into the 2017 loss cost filing. Those components were a cap on the time to reach maximum medical improvement. That's a 2.5-year cap. We had an extreme hardship safety net provision, reducing the threshold to be eligible for redetermination of classification from 80% to 75%. There was an attachment to the workforce provision and a stress-related injuries for first responders provision. The combined impact of these components was a negative 1.7%, or 1.7% savings to the workers' comp system. Moving to the 2018 changes, I'm sorry about that. As part of the 2017 reform, the Workers' Comp Board was required to revise the guidelines for impairment ratings for scheduled loss of use claims. And there are several components to the revised set of guidelines. First, under the old guidelines, there was an add-on to the impairment rating for injured employees that had an arm injury that also had a rotator cuff surgery as part of their treatment. So there was a 10% add-on to the rating. So, for example, if their actual impairment was 25%, if they had a rotator cuff surgery, it was actually calculated based on 35%. Similarly, for knee tear surgeries, for leg scheduled loss of use, there was an add-on of 7.5%. Those add-ons, as part of the revised guidelines, was eliminated. And based on the rating board's estimate, there was a savings of 2.8% to the system. Other components of the revised guidelines are for joint replacements. Under the old guidelines, impairment ratings for joint replacement were varied from 50 to 65%. Under the new guidelines, the impact is 35 to 80% depending on range of motion. So if there's good outcome from the joint replacement, the impairment rating is 35%, but if there's bad outcome, it could go as high as 80%. Finally, the contralateral provision. So this is a new item in the guidelines that says if somebody is going to the doctor and says, I have maybe 90% loss of range of motion to my arm, the doctor would say, well, let me see what your uninjured arm can do as a presumption of your pre-injury condition. So there's a comparison to the contralateral body part to determine what is the actual impact of the injury to result in the loss of use. Other regulatory changes in 2018, there's an introduction of revised medical fee schedule, which raises fees in all provider categories, and expected to be implemented in early 2019. I believe just a couple of weeks ago we had a revised draft of those guidelines put out in the State Register for public comment. The estimated impact of this revision is 3.5% increase. And a prescription drug formulary the first draft was issued in late 2017, and we anticipate a revised draft to be issued later this year. Before I get into the underwriting results and the combined ratios, I'd like to talk a little bit about loss development. Loss development measures how the valuation of losses changes over time. Here we see a loss development factor from 1st to 19th report. The blue line represents indemnity loss development factors, and the yellow line represents medical loss development factors. What does that mean? If you can see on the top right, you can see a factor of 2.090. So if we had, for example, $1 billion in losses at the first reported for the first time at the rating board, based on this factor, we estimate that after 19 years, those losses would actually be $2.09 billion. So losses grow over time. Now, when we do our analysis and trying to project, what losses would look at ultimate value, we don't just use the information from the latest calendar year. We actually use a 5-year average. And what you could see here, that there's been a decrease over time, over the last 6 or 7 years, in the loss development factors. So what happened this year, as part of this year's filing, is that the factors circled in red dropped off the 5-year average. Those high factors dropped off. And the new low factors that came in to be as part of the 5-year average. So based on that information, our estimates of losses was reduced significantly. And let's see what that did to loss ratios. Loss ratios measure the ratio of losses to premiums. These are the loss ratios as were estimated by the rating board last year in 2017. In 2018, we estimated the ratios based on the new set of data that came in, the new loss development factors, and based on those lower development factors that we saw, and the favorable experience that came in, our estimates of ultimate loss ratios were revised. So for example, in 2015, our loss ratio estimate last year was 72.3%, but in 2018, we estimated at 68.9%, and that's a decrease of 3.5 points. So each one of these accident years was reduced by a couple of points, 3 points in some years, which affects the calendar year results, because all these changes happened because the calendar year results have changed. So this brings us to the calendar year combined ratios. And you could see a very significant decrease so the first component of the combined ratio is the loss ratio, the ratio of losses to premiums. And you could see that decrease in the loss ratio from to 55% in calendar year 2017. That's a relatively low loss ratio. To obtain the combined ratio, we take the loss ratio and we add the expense ratios and dividend ratios, and that brings us to the combined ratio of 91.2% in 2017. That's a significant decrease from the relatively stable combined ratio of about 102 that we saw in the previous years, and very much down from the highs of 142 and 131 in 2010 and 2012. Shifting again to the accident year view, so the accident years are loss ratios estimates or the combined ratio estimates based on accidents that happened within that particular year. And the combined ratios in 2017 is still above 100 at 101.5. Which brings us to the loss cost filing. And you could see the 11.7 in 2018. The purple bars represent loss cost level changes. Of course, in 2008, we moved from a rate system to a loss cost system. So the blue bars represent loss cost level changes. I would like to point out that the cumulative change over the past 20 years is 4.4%. So right now, the loss costs are 4.4% higher than they were back in 1999. Sorry. And we are not the only state that's experiencing loss cost decreases, significant loss cost decreases. These are the approved rates and loss cost changes in surrounding states. And we could see Connecticut at minus 14, and that's actually the second year in a row where they had a double-digit decrease. Massachusetts at minus 12. New York is shown here at minus 12.1 because these changes exclude legislative and regulatory changes, so it's a little different than the 11.7 that we actually had. And New Jersey and Vermont also with significant decreases. And this is a countrywide phenomenon. A lot of states are experiencing significant decreases. After the rating board determines the loss costs for each individual classifications, insurance carriers then apply a loss cost multiplier to come up with their full rates. And we can see here the different loss cost multiplier ranges, and we see that most carriers have a loss cost multiplier in the range of 1.3 to 1.4. However, even though most carriers have these multipliers, most premium is actually generated in the lower loss cost multiplier bucket, under 1.2. And we show two different bars of premium here. One is before the deductible credits, which is the yellow column, and one is after those deductible credits in the blue column. And you can see that not only that more premiums are in the bucket of loss cost multiplier 1.2, but you can also see that most deductible credits are given in that, which is the difference between the bars, are given in that loss cost multiplier range. After we determine the final rates for each employer, there are several programs that are intended to better fit the final premium for each individual employer. These are individual risk rating programs. And we start with experience rating, which depends on the experience of each individual employer. And there is a minimum premium eligibility. You have to have at least $5,000 in premiums to be eligible for experience rating. And on the left side, you see the risk count distribution of those programs, and you could see that only 20% in the blue are experience rate, 20% of risks. However, on the right side, you could see the standard premium distribution, and that represents about 80% of the premium. So they're very relatively small percentage of policies, but as we saw in the distribution of risks before, they represent a lot of the premium. Other programs in the state are the merit rating program in the yellow, and other risks that are not rated. And these are usually risks that come into the system and they don't have sufficient experience to be either experience rated or merit rated. On the bottom, we have information on schedule rating. Schedule rating is a program that can vary individual employers' premium by individual characteristics, and that program was implemented in 2015. And we have about 25,000 risks subject to schedule rating, with the average rating adjustment at minus 3.4%. The band of adjustments due to schedule rating is from plus 5% to minus 5%. And the average, again, is a credit of 3.4%. So we're going to move on and start talking about losses, and we're going to start with claim frequency. And after some volatility in the claim frequency in 2009 and 2010, which was partly attributable to the financial crisis, we see that policy year claim frequency in the state has been relatively flat. And if we look at the cumulative change, we could see that in 2016, policy year, we were a little bit less than what we were in 2009. Claim frequency for accident years, again, we see this a little more magnified volatility in 2010 and 11, but still relatively flat, with a little bit of an increase in accident year 2017, which is an interesting development. But the cumulative change, even after that increase, we're still relatively below where we were in 2009. Indemnity severity. Indemnity severity is the average cost per indemnity claim. And we see that the indemnity severity in 2000, or the average cost per case in 2017 accident year, was about $60,000, similar to what it was in policy year 2016. And we see that the trend has been a little bit of increases in 2013 and 14, but then there was a little bit of a decrease, so it starts to sort of decrease and then increase again. And the yellow bars are the accident year numbers. Again, in 2017, we had a bit of an increase in the average cost per case. Indemnity benefits are a function of wages. So we'd like to compare the changes in indemnity severity to the changes in the wages over time. The yellow line here represents the change in the New York State average weekly wage from 2009. And the policy year change in severity, we see that after, it was a little bit below the wage line in 2010 and 2011, but then the severity sort of caught up with the wage line in 2013 and 14, with a little bit of volatility in 2015 and 2016. And the accident year line in purple follows generally the same pattern, catching up in 2013 and 2014 to the wage line. So we see the results generally as expected, with the severity line moving with the wage line. Let's talk about medical severity. And medical severity here is measured as the medical cost, average medical cost per lost time claims, per indemnity claim. And we see that the most recent significant increase in indemnity severity was in policy year 2013 with a 5.8 increase. But after that, the indemnity severity has sort of flattened and actually had some years with decreases. Accident year numbers show a similar pattern, with the latest increase in accident year 2012, but following that, increases about 2%, or in some years we even see some decreases. In 2017 accident year, an increase of 3.4%. The average medical cost per lost time claim is about $33,000. And for indemnity, we measured the change in severity as compared to increases in wages. On the medical side, we compare changes in medical severity to the changes in the medical consumer price index, which is presented here in the yellow line. The policy year changes in medical severity have been relatively consistent with the medical CPI line up to 2013, but following that, we see those decreases, so the lines diverge. And we see a similar picture for the accident year medical severity, with the line starting to diverge in accident year 2014. Claim closure rates. It's always interesting to see what is the rate of closure of claims, so how quickly claims close. So here we see, I'll spend a couple minutes just explaining this line. At first report, the point on the purple line all the way to the left, you could see that only about 70% claims were closed. After 10 years, all the way to the right, you could see that almost 90% of claims are closed, or about 96%, excuse me. That means that 3.5% of claims are still open after 10 years. But we're going to see very different pictures for medical-only claims, which are relatively minor in cost, and they close a lot faster, as you're going to see, and lost time claims, which are the significant cost drivers. Medical-only claims, we have about 90% closed as early as first report, as soon as they're reported to the rating board. After 10 years, we have 99.6%. So virtually all medical-only claims are closed after 10 years. Lost time claims, in the yellow line, you could see that at first report, only about 35% of claims are closed. And after 10 years, we still have about 10% of claims still open. And we also put on this chart a graph of the payment pattern. And the interesting point here is a 10th report. So we said about 10% of lost time claims are still open. But in terms of payments, only about 70% of claims have been paid out after 10 years. So there's still 30% of payments to be made on those 10% of lost time claims that are open. So that tells us that these claims that are open after 10 years, those are the costliest claims. It will take much longer to close and have a lot more to be paid on them. Moving to loss distributions, and we're going to start with the breakdown between indemnity and medical losses. And in New York, we have about 66% of claims of medical loss of losses are indemnity, and 34% are medical. This is a very different picture than what we see across the country, where the split is about 40-60 towards medical. Medical is much higher across the country than it is in New York. On the bottom, we have that medical indemnity breakdown by type of injury. And all the way in the bottom, you can see medical only is 100% medical, as expected. And for fatal claims, which is the first line in the back in the bottom chart, you see that about 10% of the losses on fatal claims are medical. But the bulk of the losses, as you're going to see in the next slide, are permanent, partial, and temporary claims, and those are the major drivers of the overall split that you see above. So this is the distribution by injury type, and you can see that although about 60% of claims are medical-only claims, again, because these are the smaller group of claims, they only represent about just over 2% of total losses. Permanent partial claims, those are the non-scheduled PPDs and the scheduled loss of use claims, are 72% of claims, even though they're only about 72% of loss amounts, even though they're about 18% of claims. So those are the costlier claims that we see in the marketplace. We'd like to examine losses by industry group and by hazard group. And we see that when we look at industry group on the left-hand side, we see that the services category generates the most losses in the system at 34.3%. And the largest class that generates losses in that category is trucking. So you have a lot of motor vehicle accidents and other losses in the trucking industry that results in this distribution. Hazard group measures the propensity of a particular occupational classification to experience a very large loss. And they vary from, we label them A through G, and A is the least likely classes, the classes that are least likely to experience a very large loss. And G has classes like explosive manufacturing and logging and lumbering, which are more susceptible to very large losses. So this is a distribution of losses by those hazard groups. And hazard group C actually generates most losses, but this is just because of the sheer volume of classes in the office and clerical category that just generates a lot of losses, and that class code is in hazard group C. But what's interesting to observe is when we look at industry group and hazard group severities, you can see, if you can see, the contracting hazard industry group labeled here has the highest severity, which is 122,000.
What is contracting, right?
Contracting is construction.
Oh, that is.
Construction. So the contracting industry group generates the most, are the most expensive claims. The other industry groups are about the same from that perspective, and that's true both for indemnity losses in blue and medical losses in yellow. They're both higher than the other industry groups.
Seeing that our equipment seems to be having some issues, I'm sorry to do this to you. Could you maybe start to wrap it up so that we can
Sure.
address? I'm concerned about the equipment.
Yeah.
It seems to be getting worse.
Okay, I'm going to try to.
Clicker? Are you
No,
using clicker?
I'm
No, so it is the equipment.
Even when he doesn't touch the clicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we can do is, this is a great, we're gonna have this presentation sent to our members and stuff, but
Sure.
if you could.
Let me just have just a few more slides. Hazard group severities are behaving as expected, with the average severities increasing from A through G. This is this distribution by part of body. And we have, on the left side, we have claim counts, the top 10 claim counts by part of body. And on the right side, we have the top 10 in terms of loss amounts. And you can see that some body parts are more expensive than others. For example, shoulder and upper arm represent 9.5% of claims, but about 15% of losses, so they're more expensive. When you look at fingers and thumbs, they represent 12% of claims, but only about 3% of loss amounts. Just a few more slides on medical distributions. So here we have the distribution of medical costs by broad category, and we see that physicians generate the highest amount of medical payments at 43.8%, followed by hospitals and at 24.6%. Drug is 15.3%, but that's a decrease from what we've seen last year. Over the past few years, it was about 17, 18%. So drug costs are coming down in the state. Looking at the physician services, specifically, we see that surgeons are the highest category, getting 27.8%, followed by physical medicine at 21.5% of those physician services. Breaking down hospital categories, we see that inpatient hospital services are about half the hospital and facility services, followed by outpatient hospitals and ambulatory surgical centers. Prescription drugs, this just tells you that in the early year of a claims, drug costs are a lesser percentage of all the medical payments that are made. Because of the first year of a claim, you could have costs such as hospitalization, surgery, so drugs are a lesser component. But as you go through, as a claim gets older, in the later years, drug costs actually represent as much as 46% of the cost of the medical payments on a claim. Because you're not going to have that many surgeries later on, but you're going to have pain management programs, et cetera, that are heavily influenced by the drug costs. This is just about prescription drug spending, and we can see that the highest category is opioids at 25%, and that's actually decreased from last year. So we do see some decreases in the opioid category, which is a good thing because we all hear about it in the news, the opioid epidemic. So we have a decrease in the opioids as percentage of all drugs. And this is just a distribution of the different opioids, and we see the decrease in opioids. We observe it across all opioid categories. So this concludes my prepared remarks. I thank you all for listening and for bearing with me and the equipment problems we had. Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 9, adjourning the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I'm also yes, meeting adjourned. Thank you. And thank you so much, guests, and particularly for bearing with that.